Howdy, howdy. Welcome to another episode of the Watching Privacy Show. We've got Brent and Raju with us and a lot to dive in this week. So we can just talk about this week in privacy and hit some of the highlights of the article right off the bat. Let's see, what do we have first up? This was a kind of a wild one. So Google Calendar will break down how much of your work is spent in meetings, rolling out now. So it kind of goes a lot along the lines of the theme we were talking about last week in terms of kind of just employer tracking, I would say, in general. It's interesting that they would bring this out, especially after the backlash that Microsoft got a while back about their, I would say, performance management and tracking functionality that they were introducing in Office 365 for organizations. But long story short, this feature basically tends to track how much time you spend in meetings, basically based on your Google Calendar. And will provide insights on, I guess, how productive or unproductive you are. Arguably, meetings are the least productive part of a day, so I'm not sure how it really tracks positively to productivity. But what did you guys think of this one?
There are two aspects to it, right? One, this is the beginning of what? This is probably the first step. Now, I'm sure the email team will say, I want to share information on how many emails that are being sent, how many responded, how many unresponded. These things will come out next, and same thing with the task documents and whatnot. When you have this information showed to the individual, it's not an issue. But when it is shared with the organization, then it could get a little tricky, and that becomes a slippery slope. I hope it doesn't go there. Because Microsoft released something like that a few months back, and there was a significant pushback. So they had to pull back that functionality. And I see Google headed down this path. The thing I do not like about this is it's on by default, just like anything Google. So I think that has to change.
Yeah, I brought this up because that's what stood out to me. It was on by default. It can only be minimized, not disabled by end users. And that's another thing. And it adds that it might be possible to see another person's breakdown if you have permission to manage their calendar. So there are a lot of holes in this thing. There are a lot of opportunities for surveillance of this thing. And, we seem to be talking about this stuff more and more every week. Somebody, does a tweak. It provides access, but it also provides surveillance, and it also kind of a lack of privacy or a lack of control. So the employee, you can't even, it's already defaulted on. You can't take it off. It's just minimized. It's not disabled. So once again, you don't have any control over what's going on. And to me, that is an issue, particularly when you're talking about employees and their privacy rights and, what their expectations are for having a work environment that doesn't feel like somebody's over your, looking over your shoulder every time you do something.
They're doing it for you, Brent. They want to show the appropriate ad between your podcasts, so they know your schedule, and the right ad will show up because when you're busy. They know when you're busy.
Thanks, guys. I don't know what else to say on that one. Thank you, Google, for looking out for me like that.
I mean, two things that were funky about the screenshot you just had up on the screen was, it might be visible. Either it is or it isn't. Don't tell me that you don't know if it's visible or not. I mean, that seems just such a weird thing to kind of dance around. And then, like Raju was mentioning, on by default, I think that's the problem with all these features. They could be great, especially because they start out the sentence saying it's visible to you, not your manager, though they very clearly don't say organizational admin either. So sometimes you got to read between the lines on these kinds of things to make sure. But ultimately, just on by default is so pointless. There's a number of ways you can just put a pop-up in an application and say, hey, look, you want to see how productive you are, how much of your week is going into meetings? Turn on this feature or try it out, right? Why the default on for a company that has lost pretty much all sense of trust in terms of privacy, there's some nefarious reason for it to be defaulted on. Otherwise, if you had faith in the feature, you would overlay like a video or some, in-app introduction to the feature and let people choose for themselves, right? Why the default on means that, we know even what we saw from the Apple enhancement for allowing third-party tracking, right? Something like 95% of people will say no when asked, but if it was default on like it was before, nobody's going to go out of their way to really turn it off. And I think that's kind of one of the broader problems with the industry is a lot of times we'll come up with these features, which, honestly, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say best of intentions. It's, completely private and everything like that. Just, you earn trust by opting into things and providing value and convincing someone why they should enable something, not forcing it down their throat and making them hopefully disable it later down the line. It just seems, it seems like a limited upside and a lot more downside for the people that care about it.
Today, surveillance is on by default. We have to transition to privacy being on by default. And we have to go through that transition. And some of these companies that can't make that transition will lose the trust. And that's what we're going through.
I like that. That should be like surveillance is on. What do you say? Surveillance is on by default?
Surveillance is on by default today.
Yeah.
Privacy should be on by default.
That sounds like a bumper sticker, a T-shirt. Because it's very easy to understand what you just said. And the fact that it is that way today, what does that say about where we are today? Like surveillance is on by default, privacy is off by default.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I guess running along the common thread, I guess, let's see, there was an Instagram announcement actually about asking people for their birthdays. And I think we talked about this last week or the week before, but this push for, I would say, social media in general to verify ages for, targeting or whatever reasons to protect the kids, obviously important, but, the way that they're going about it. And then I also saw YouTube is doing something similar in terms of verifying ages for accounts. But basically for the Instagram one, there was going to be almost unlimited pop-ups in terms of ensuring someone verifies their age. And then, warning screens can be on posts that will ask for your birthday to basically confirm. But the thing that stuck out to me was really using AI on happy birthday posts to estimate ages. And that was a little funny. And then on the YouTube thread, I saw a funny comment on Hacker News, and the guy said that he's had their Gmail account for something like 15 or 17 years. And so clearly they should be over 13, but still gets prompted for their age and asks to either upload like the driver's license or whatever. So, I mean, I think it's just, the guise of protection is really just, we estimated what your age was for a really long time, and now we know for sure, and we're making you know. And, we'll just say we want to protect everybody and cobble up the information that way. So what do you guys think of that?
I think the two things that really stand out for me. Number one, when there is a legislation that is passed saying that this information should not be showed for, say, certain age groups, that there are implications to that. And one of those implications is it plays right into the hands of the monopolies. In this case, the law will say you're not supposed to show this piece of content to teenagers or kids below a certain age. And what happens with that is to implement that, now these monopolies have to collect the age. You're just playing right into their thing. And number one, once that age is there, they have to collect that information. But how do they verify it's that person? They have to mandate that person to be logged in. Once you're mandating someone to be logged in with their ID verified, then surveillance it's basically an open season from then on. So it purely plays right into the hands of these monopolies, and that's what's happening. And I think that has to be figured out. Because for example, I never log into my, let's say, Google account on my computer. I don't remember the last time I logged in, at least not in the last 3 years. And I also avoid installing spyware like Chrome on my computer. So what in my case now, if they have to show me some content, they want me to log in. Of course, they want me to log in because they can track me, and that is precisely the reason I am trying to avoid that. So this law purely plays in the hands of these monopolies. Then the second aspect that you mentioned, Tejas, is about how do they know the age. Actually, they know the age without you telling them. And we discussed this in one of the previous episodes. Try applying for, let's say, an Apple card by providing a wrong date of birth. Well, they'll reject you because you provided them the wrong date of birth. How do they know your actual date of birth? Well, let's just say there are data brokers and whatnot that provide them this information. So Facebook likely knows the date of birth of all the candidates. They have done the association. They just need a confirmation. Try inputting a wrong date of birth, and they'll tell you that you may have entered the wrong one because they have that information. Try that. You should try that trick. I mean, I don't have a Facebook account, so I'm not going to try it, but worth a try.
I'm gonna. Oops, looks like I got an echo. Are you guys hearing the echo here?
Okay, on my side.
That's just me then. All right, so I wanted to put up this because I found this kind of interesting. So in that announcement about wanting the birthdays, maybe I'm going to say something kind of positive here. They actually do spell out what they're going to do and why they want to do it. So they say they need to know how old everybody is, to create safer, private experiences. That kind of sounds good. All right. And then I give me even credit for this. This information allows us to personalize your experience. For example, we can apply recent changes we made to our restrict advertiser targeting options. So at least they're saying, look, safer, but we're going to use this for advertising still. At least they're spelling it out. At least they're saying it at this point, because before, they didn't care. They would just do something and make you say okay, and the default was you're going to go along with it. So I will say this: at least they're getting a little better with explaining things. Now they're still emphasizing, the things that they want you to know, and still sliding in a little bit of we're going to get this on the back end too. But at least it's out there because for years they didn't even do that much. And I'm not talking about Facebook specifically. I'm just saying that was like an industry practice.
I think you left out the best part about this quote that you have on the screen. It also helps us show you more relevant ads. That's the whole point.
You would think that would be, in there now. And like I said, it wasn't as emphasized as all the other stuff, but at least it's there. So we give them a little credit for that.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is like, we talked about this a couple weeks ago too, but people think about it as protecting people in the current point in time, but it's really building out a lifetime profile here. What's the 5-10 year game when someone's 12, 11, or 10, and then in 5-7 years, once they're 18 and prime, spending age probably, or targeting age, that's the key you've basically built out now. And so, for the short term, protect the kids. I get it. It's important. And, not just belittling that by any means. But I guess the longer term implications of that verification and kind of sourcing of the information and building out more deeper profiles is going to have, I think, bigger impacts down the road. And like we said before, just because you're not targeting ads or you're restricting what ads are sent to them today doesn't mean you're not building out the profile to shove ads down their throat in 5 years, which is, kind of what you got to do.
Yeah, they're still collecting that data, even if they give you they say you don't see ads. That doesn't mean we're not collecting data.
Yeah. So, shifting gears a little bit, I guess, on the other side of the world, there's been some big developments. We'll start with South Korea. The parliament passed a bill to basically curb Google and Apple App Store payment systems, effectively stopping them from charging commissions on in-app purchases. And so they basically ban App Store operators with a dominant market position from forcing payment systems on content providers and inappropriately delaying the review of deleting or mobile content from apps disputes regarding payment. So basically all around payment systems for these app stores. And I will probably take maybe the Brent approach of a glass half full. I kind of like App Store payment options because I don't like setting up payment profiles with, 40 different apps that I sign up for and having my credit card information in 40 different places. I know that I'm paying Apple. I trust Apple, at least with this payment information. They charge me, and then, that money gets distributed. Does it kind of suck for a developer to lose 30% because of that? Yeah, but from a consumer perspective, the amount of times I've had to buy things from shady websites, that sounded bad, but you get what I mean. From like websites that I buy things from, I don't want to have to keep creating new profiles and inputting my information and then find out 6 months later that some data broker that they were using ends up, having some kind of a data leak, or, sometimes I never even know because it was some sub-processor of information. In this case, my financial relationship is with Apple. That's where I'm buying my stuff from. And the way I kind of, probably not an apples to apples comparison, but imagine you went to Costco and you could either buy stuff from Costco, or the vendor said, if you are buying this 50 pack of toilet paper, you can buy it directly from us for maybe 5% cheaper, but you got to go create an account, give us your credit card information. Nah, man, I came to the store. That's where I buy everything. I'm checking out at the actual checkout station, and that's my financial relationship. So I'm a little torn on this. I guess the flexibility for options is good, but I think the argument became really big around this Epic thing, and the way I kind of see it is big vendors or big companies like Epic or Zynga or like whoever's big game manufacturers who are making these millions and billions of dollars in the App Store. Yeah, that 30% is kind of killer. But for a smaller indie developer who's maybe making anywhere from 5 to 10,000 or 100,000 or under a million, I think, in revenue from the App Store, do I trust that person to understand, financial compliance? Or, hopefully they're just plugging into Stripe or something easy. But if not, and they're trying to build their own system out, I don't know if I really trust it. And there's no transparency. There's probably not going to be a lot of information displayed to me about what protections are in place. So I don't know. I'm a little torn on this. I guess options are always better than no options, but what do you guys think?
There is always that additional context that is important. One, I agree with you. There is a convenience that comes with App Store, and there's no beating that. Then there is the other side of it where it is a duopoly at this point, and they have to be in check. And these are steps towards that. And some of the moves that some of the governments are making are along these lines, which I think I like. It's important that there's a competition there. When it is a duopoly and both of them charge 30% or 15%, depending on the context, that has to be in check. And I see that in that realm. Then, if you look at the context here, it is South Korea, where Android actually is more against Google than Apple. Where Google has about 73% market share in South Korea, and then Google's primary competition is Samsung. So it is a pro Samsung deal. Then there is that angle to it as well. So contextual. So every country will go through this and will do what's best for them.
I'm going to go with kind of what Tejas said. I think it's about trust. Or levels of trust. I guess there are levels to everything, and there's levels to trust. Maybe I do trust Apple and Google more in certain areas than I trust certain app developers that I really don't know much about, although I like the little app they made. And maybe that's the reason why I freely, open and download these apps, because I'm not as worried about certain aspects because they're covered by the big guys. Now that could be a flaw of mine, but I think, Tejas, you have something there in regards to, maybe it's easier for me to trust maybe I'll say this, trust the devil I know rather than the devil I don't know. Maybe that's how I'm looking at this, because I totally connected with what you said with that, Tejas.
And
yeah, I mean, I think it's, or I'll just say one quick thing. Basically, you have to choose between like your financial security and your privacy, right? I trust the big players in terms of financial security, maybe protecting my financial information, making sure there's no leak there. But I also know that there's a trade-off in terms of now those two big monopolies know exactly what I'm buying, when I'm buying it, how much of it I'm buying, and those kind of things, right? And so arguably it's a lose-lose, right? Do I risk my financial side of things for privacy by going direct to the vendor, or do I go to the big guys?
Yeah, and to me, I stick to subscribing to Apple because one of the main reasons is, one, they make it easy. The two, they make it easy to cancel. To me, that is equally important. Try canceling in other sources. I mean, let's say I subscribe to actually New York Times. It's easy to subscribe online. Try canceling New York Times. You cannot cancel online, number one. You have to call or chats with someone who will convince you to not to cancel, and then you have to go through another hoop. So then the whole point is lost. So that loses trust among the vendor. That's why I stick to Apple, because I know when I say want to cancel, they are not going to force me into into not doing it. I think that ease of cancellation exists with some of these vendors. That is equally important.
The worst part about the New York Times example is, I think per CCPA in California, they have to have an online cancellation option. So they might give it to you if you live in California, but for the other 49 states, they'll make you jump through the hoops, which is like you already built out this feature to let people cancel on themselves. Just let us all have it. Like it's for your net good. If you're not providing value, someone wants to cancel, let them cancel. I think that's probably just a bigger like business ethics 101, right? Like companies that have like terrible refund policies or this like, kind of tricky way of getting people into the system, even like trials that require a credit card. It's like, what do you think I'm going to do? Like run away? Like your whole goal of that is to basically hope that I forget about it. And luckily you can maybe milk a couple payment cycles out of me because I won't notice on my credit card. And then eventually I'll cancel it and then I'll hate you for it. Right. And was that net company, I would say, brand withdrawal worth the, I don't know, 2 or 3 payments you made? Probably not. So, I mean, even beyond the privacy and the cancellation and the ease, it's just like business 101. Let people cancel. If you're not providing a valuable service, you shouldn't really hold them down with chains. I don't know why that's so complicated for a lot of companies.
They're basically saying, we are going to fault you and penalize you for something that we did wrong enough for you not to want our service anymore. So bad on you for not finding the value that we're providing you that we want to get paid for every month.
Yeah. On a completely wild tangent, I remember when I was in like elementary school, middle school, AOL would send out those CDs with like, or even diskettes, I guess, with like 10 or 50 free hours of like internet, right? And for probably 4 years, give or take, I would call like, or my dad would make me call basically every at the end of every month or every 30-day trial period and cancel it. And then you would just get like another month or 2 months for free. And then you just had free internet for like 4 years at a time. And it was just mind blowing that like, how is this company in business? And then you realize, well, AOL today is probably one of the reasons why they're not in business. But just like the entire system was so broken, even, 20 years ago, that it still continues today. Because in the New York Times example, they'll cancel and be like, oh, cool, we'll extend it for 2 more months, try it out and see if you change your mind, right? And that's kind of what their hope is. But I don't know. That whole thing is...
These online memberships, subscription memberships are, I would say, online equivalent to gym memberships.
Oh God,
If you ever
yeah, I had a bad experience with actually Gold's Gym when the pandemic started. I remember like 2020, it was like March, April or something like that. Things were closing down. I was like, I'm not going to go to the gym anytime soon. It doesn't really seem like the place to be. So try to cancel. You can't cancel Gold's Gym online. You have to go to the physical store. At the store, you have to fill out this like incredibly it's like someone took the worst UX design on a form in paper, like worse than a tax form or a government form. These small boxes, you can't read anything. You have to fill it out. And then after you cancel, you're still on the hook for like 2 more billing cycles afterwards. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like, I'm not coming to your gym. I haven't been there in like 3 months. And I guess the entire gym financial model is based on people not going there. So for them, it's in their best interest. But yeah, gyms are probably right up there in terms of bad cancellation. That's probably why Anytime Fitness or Planet Fitness, I think, does well, because no contracts, $10 a month, come if you want. If you don't come, that's fine. $10, you're not really stressing about it, I guess.
I'll tell you one quick gym cancellation story. I joined the gym when I was working on a project in DC. I forget which gym it is, and it's probably best that I don't say it, even if I did know what it was. So they had a policy that you could not cancel if you lived anywhere within a 25-mile radius of one of their gyms. So I moved, I was only there for like a 3-month assignment, but I wanted to get a good workout in. So when I rolled off the project, came back home to Atlanta, the closest one of these things, it seems like it was like 24 miles. So it was like just within the thing. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I literally had to call my buddy who lives in South Georgia, where they don't have paved roads. So I knew they didn't have any of these gyms, and say, look, buddy, let me use your address so I can get out of this gym membership I had to get in Jesus. So it literally, I had to go through that. And then they actually called him to say, did Brent Leary actually live here? So they talk about making New York Times is a piece of cake compared to that. So.
heading there, Brent.
Oh, I guess jumping back in, I guess last thing that was this week in privacy, I think is arguably probably one of the most wildest things. Australia down south on the other side of the world has kind of been doing a lot with COVID in general, or COVID as maybe the shield for a lot of this surveillance stuff that they got going on over there. So this thing Brent's got on the screen right now is kind of the first one where they passed new legislation that was, I guess, extremely rushed within 24 hours, and there's three main aspects to it, I guess. There's like a data disruption warrant, a network activity warrant, and an account takeover warrant. And so all three of these basically give the police the ability to basically, on the data end, modify, copy, delete your data that you possess. The network activity lets them obviously get your network activity. And then account takeover, which was probably one of the wildest ones, is allows the police to take control of an online account like social media for the purposes of gathering information for an investigation. And Australian companies are obliged to comply. And man, oh man, does Australia, I think, this is just one of the stories about Australia. There was another wild one that I'll talk about after this one. But, how good is this for the people? What do you guys think?
Australia is sounding like Orwellia. That pretty much summarizes, right? That Orwellia is probably the right name till they get rid of these legislations or these rules.
All right, so I literally did a search to see what people are talking about on this. So I came to this Reddit. I think it's Reddit Australia. So it's like for the whole country. Mm-hmm. Look at first of all, this is whoever did this. I think it's Lord Crumb. Lord Crumb, I guess, is what the dude's name is.
Thankfully, he had a PC username.
Yeah, look at the lens he put this on. Australian police can now hack your device, collect or delete your data, take over your social media accounts, all without a judge warrant after a bill rushed through Parliament in 24 hours. Look at how many comments it got. 1,500 comments. It's been up 26,000 times. And look, the dude had to close the thread down. I mean, it was...
No, the moderators did.
Being discussed in 74 other communities.
Yeah. He didn't close it, Brent. The moderators closed it.
Yeah, the moderators closed it because they're getting too much stuff on this thing. Yeah. And they did all this within a 24-hour period of this bill being put up. That's unbelievable what happened in Australia.
Remember, it's moderators, our government. Moderators of Australia, which probably, proves the case.
Yeah, he's probably, wait a minute. I'm a government official. I got to get rid of this. Can we delete this whole thread? Actually,
the other story that I thought was honestly a little even crazier. There was a post in the Atlantic. I don't know if I shared the link earlier or not, but basically, I'll read a paragraph here. Interstate travel within Australia is also severely restricted. And the government of South Australia, one of the country's 6 states, developed and is now testing an app as Orwellian as any in the free world to enforce its quarantine rules. People in South Australia will be forced to download an app that combines facial recognition and geolocation. The state will text them at random times, and thereby they'll have 15 minutes to take a picture of their face in the location where they're supposed to be. Should they fail, the local police department will be sent to follow up in person.
You got to be.
And then
really
the premier Stephen Marshall says, "I think every South Australian should feel pretty proud that we are the national pilot for a home-based quarantine app. Are we proud?" So geolocation, facial recognition from the government, and then within 15 minutes, you can't take a nap, you can't doze off or do anything. You have to reply, or the cops will come knocking on your doors. I don't know. This is just, I guess, it seems like an Onion article, right? Like, it doesn't even seem real, right? Like,
I don't have words. That's crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah, government forcing the app, first of all, then, your location is now tracked 100%, faces on top. It's just that's about as slippery as a slope. And usually I feel like it's almost, I guess you got to applaud the transparency at least. Otherwise there might be some shady way of kind of explaining it. But here it's just like, no, we're going to tell you it's facial recognition, it's geolocation. Normally you can think of, yeah,
they're telling you what they're going to do. You don't have a choice. It's unbelievable.
I don't know. This is a weird one. Australia's got some stuff going on down there. I guess our COVID situation is pretty bad, but still, it's kind of crazy. But I mean, these kind of, I would say it's a pretty big vacuum for, I would say, government opportunity currently, right? Like in a lockdown, not to get into politics much, but in general, like this is a good situation to figure it out, right? Now that you've got that database of data, you think it's just going to be deleted when COVID's over, and we're going to stop using it? I don't think so. I think they'll find their purposes for it. Just like kids using Instagram in a couple of years, that data is still going to be valuable, just maybe in good sense today.
Is it going to be just the government that owns the data, or is it a contract firm that is doing it for
Oh
the
man,
government who basically will try to maximize their profits by selling it to? So that's likely the
Data
case.
brokers.
Yeah, I didn't dig too deep into that article and read it, but I mean, in general, most of these government apps are built by some third-party consulting firm or something like that, right? And then that data or the IP is going to be pushed out and probably shared elsewhere. So, not a very good situation by any means. So,
Isn't it
ugh.
kind of nuts how different these rules and regulations and policies are being developed depending on what country you're in? I mean, it is unreal trying to deal and understand this. What if you're, a company that has customers all throughout the globe? How much time and effort are you going to have to put into understanding all this stuff and then implementing it in a way that makes sense?
I think more broadly, if you look at it at the macro level, the way I see it is the last decade or two, we have centralized a lot of things. Tracking becomes centralized. The globalization pretty much led to a lot of centralization. The next 10 or 20 years, I think we'll move towards decentralization because privacy becoming a core reason why. Take something like a SaaS company. How many SaaS companies start tracking their users left and right? That didn't happen when people or companies had all the data within their cloud, right, within their own intranet. I suspect the pendulum is going to swing back into their own private clouds within the companies, because the central SaaS companies are abusing their central position of aggregating the data and selling that data and whatnot. I think that decentralization will likely be the next wave. So the cloud and the centralized way of running even the internet at this point and all the applications related to it will now probably has reached their peak, and because of these privacy abuse, surveillance, and whatnot, a likely pendulum will swing towards decentralized nature of things, and that's happening at the technology level, likely at the network internet level, will happen at the country level. The economics and all of those are pointing towards a decentralized world in the next decade or two.
Yeah, I think this Australia story is kind of a good segue into our deep dive on just kind of the use of, we could broadly say maybe biometrics. We could say any kind of like physically, personally identifiable information. Maybe we'll coin a new term with that one. But whether it's kind of the Amazon story from a couple of weeks ago about $10 for your handprint, all this facial recognition story. I saw a wild tweet earlier this week. There was a school district, I forgot the name of it, but for their sake, I guess I won't even mention it, that was proudly advertising about how they've introduced facial recognition for contactless meal purchases at the school, right? So these are kids now that you're obviously saying it's a school district doing it, that's implementing the facial recognition. And obviously we know that the school district didn't build this application and it's not storing it in-house. It's built by some technology firm or consulting firm, and that data is probably stored in some public cloud somewhere. And so, I mean, I think it's a really slippery slope. I mean, we've always been worried about kind of our digital footprint, but I think we got to start worrying about our physical footprints too nowadays, because they're trying to tie the two closer and closer together. And so that's kind of I don't know, weird situation. But what are your thoughts on just kind of this physical blend of surveillance? Before we thought it was all digital, and if you walk around on the street, you're perfectly fine. But now we're seeing that that's not really the case. There's a lot of physical aspects that are being tracked.
It's already, I think, in motion, whether we like it or not. And look at various aspects of biometric, right? Face ID is one form of identification. Like with Touch ID, thumbprint and whatnot has made its way into hundreds of millions of phones. So that's another form of identification. Then with Amazon thing, you have the entire palm print. And that's another form of identification. Then there is voice. Voice is another form of identification that's already in there. Like the so-called smart speakers now will automatically determine who is asking the question and answer with their name in there. I mean, that is considered a feature or a security feature. So if you look at all of these forms of biometric information, private companies have this information, and I'm sure the retina scan and all of that is just a matter of time before they make it. So these are all forms that are already in place, and now it is in the hands of private companies. Whatever happens with that, our first thing is, how are these companies protecting this information? It is probably in their best interest to protect their information if they are in that business, but some of them are not. They are in the I guess a data brokerage business, where these providers of biometric authentication systems will be the equivalent of single sign-on for the web. So because biometric is one form of authentication that we do. Are there any legislations that restrict some of it, restrict the usage of it? No, I don't think there are. Or at least there has to be more stringent verification. And that will become an increasingly important issue when you consider the fact that companies are collecting information across geographies. Like how comfortable will, say, an American be when an American residing in Australia has Australian all this information, facial ID, and being tracked and whatnot. It will, and if it is hosted there, how comfortable will they be? So, and these are going to be the tensions that will come up moving forward because of the way we have centralized a lot of these. And that's the reason I'm saying we'll move towards the decentralization. But biometric, if you step back and think about it, what is the information that we have about ourselves that we haven't provided to these technology providers? That's a good question to ask. Or what percentage of our own personal information is not available to these technology providers? And that includes the physical or biometric information like Face ID, Thumb ID, voice, and whatnot. If you look at all of these, then you'll be surprised that they probably know 80-90% of information about us, that knowingly or unknowingly we have provided that, and that is a scary part. How are they taking care of it? Because all of this information is in a central place. It's just a one leak away or one partnership away from leaking it to the public. That is the scary part.
I would say, you said 90%. Let's say that that's right. They have 90% of it. As more of our interactions become digital, that number just goes up. And I don't know about you, but I don't sit around analyzing my own, behaviors and things like that. I just use different things, and a lot of these things are digital, and they're creating these footprints and little crumbs, which are being picked up by these companies. And they literally know more about me and my behaviors and my tendencies than I do, because I'm not sitting around studying my own tendencies, but they are, because they're looking for ways to get more of my attention and convert on all this data that they have. So let's say 90% now. In a couple of years, that 90% is probably going to be like 95, 96, 7. And I go back to what's going on with Australia. They're basically saying you're going to have to download this app and use it so that we can have that, so we can keep tabs on you, basically. That is, I'm still stuck on that. Is some scary stuff. Is that enough to make people think about leaving a country when your privacy is that taken for granted or taking over? This is amazing what's going on today.
Yeah, I think what you said last about leaving a country is kind of important. Honestly, I would say, even if we take it from the U.S. perspective of states, every state will have its own rules and regulations and policies towards things, and kind of, I think now that things are a little bit more digital for a vast majority of people, the ability to move around and still either maintain your current job or find a new job in the new area is a little bit easier. But I mean, you got to balance, like, people have roots in certain areas and you shouldn't be forced to leave. But the best way to really is kind of vote with your feet, right? Like, there's two ways: either you dig your heels in and try to make policy changes locally, or you know what, I'm gonna go somewhere that aligns with my values, right? And maybe we'll have countries on all ends of the spectrum that are basically, privacy first, or maybe security first, or maybe government controlled more, right? And whichever one you think aligns with kind of the way you like things to be run. Some people might like the China method of, handling a situation and having like authority and control and, maybe decisiveness. Some might like the American, I don't know if anybody likes the American system of bureaucracy, but some might find it interesting, or some European options, or maybe even, emerging markets like Africa or what do you call Pacific Islands could be really big game changers in this. Like Singapore, I think earned a lot of goodwill in general for the way they approach solutions to different problems, like its political problems, or in general how they treat their citizens. And so we could start just seeing a shift, and ultimately we'll see what's the winning solution. Because at the end of the day, I think only the country can protect you. So you really have to be like aligned with somewhere that country has the citizens' best interest at heart, and your kind of ideals align. And if that requires uprooting, at some point someone has to make that call, right? I think it's easier said than done, but I think that's probably where we're going going towards with kind of the growth of like these digital nomads. You should be able to function from anywhere, but the protection, you'll choose where you want to stay based on those rights that you get.
But regarding that voting with your feet, and going back to that article about Australia, looks like it's not pretty straightforward to just walk out of the country. You have to.
I mean, you physically can't. You have to take a boat or a plane.
They're basically saying citizens are restricted, and you have to go through. You have to go through some, and you have to be part of a certain list to even leave the country. So they have restricted that part too. So I think there are.
Well,
you can't even leave if you want
can
to.
physically leave, but does your data stay with them? I mean, if they've already got certain pieces of your data there, I can't imagine, oh, you're leaving, you're not a citizen anymore. All right, we're gonna give you your data, the only copy of your data. I don't think so.
Yeah, and going back to the biometric part, right? One of the things that I'm thinking about, or at least kind of worrying, is the identity of an individual. Typically, when you're trying to log into your digital profiles and whatnot, right? You look at authentication. We say, hey, 2-factor authentication is secure, or 3-factor authentication is secure. If you step back and say, what are these factors, right? The factors are what you know. That's number one. Number two, what you have. And number three is who you are. These are basically considered 3 factors of authentication. Individually, they may be secure, but as a combination, they're more secure. So that really authenticates that it's you, right? Now, if you look at each of these individually, and how or to what extent these providers have access to that data, if you look at what you know, that is the password and whatnot, all of the monopolies today and the surveillance vendors, they run the authentication system. You log into your Google account, you log into your Facebook account, Apple account, or whatnot, right? They have that information about what you know, that is the password and authentication. Then you're talking about what you have. And for the most part, your phone is becoming the ID for everything, be it digital wallets, be it various other things where you just scan your phone to walk into an airport or walk into an office and whatnot. So the physical device is something that is being used for that part. Then there is a third part, which is who you are. Who you are part is being identified based on your biometrics. Facial scan, retina scan, your thumbprint, handprint, and whatnot. Now, if you look at that information is also now being captured by the surveillance companies. So all 3 parts of this authentication is now available through these surveillance providers. And that is the scary part, which means they have all the sources to get into whatever information you have on their system or any other systems out there. And it may not be an issue now, but fast forward 5 years, 10 years, and that is gonna get scary.
I think that's a good note to add on. Yeah, there's what do you call it? Soon we got to start doing a lot more about action items we can take and stuff like that. We'll start a series here shortly on what people can do to protect themselves, because otherwise it can be a little depressing to think about these kind of things. But I think you broke down even the MFA example pretty well in terms of what it is that's actually happening. But identity is a big part, so we'll see I guess where that goes. But I guess we're rounding out about 45 minutes, so we can wrap. One thing I forgot to mention at the top, but earlier this morning it was announced that Apple's CSAM scanning was getting delayed. I guess they, in I would say non-typical Apple fashion, they listened to all the negative feedback they were getting and basically said, we'll go back to the drawing board and figure out what they're going to do. So it's not going to pop up in iOS 15 right off the bat, and it'll get delayed for a while and until they can figure out how to reword it to make it, I guess, a little bit more palatable for people. So that was, I guess, big news for today.
That is the reason to be vocal about it, and that is the reason we are discussing about all of these topics. Is we have to be talking about our privacy and what it means, and it is important to be vocal. That way, we can make sure that these vendors are questioned about some of the power they have.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the best example because Apple's not really known to listen to customers that much, but because there was so much of fuss, and that means that the fight is still worth fighting, right? It's still worth talking about these things, raising awareness, and that's really the most important thing. If we just kind of rolled over, then we would get steamrolled. So I think it's a breath of fresh air. Otherwise, Apple News, like, share, subscribe, because that is the most important thing. As always, tell your friends about it. Really appreciate everyone who joins. What do you call it? I think that might be it. Long weekend, so hopefully everybody enjoys. And I think Brent actually reminded me of something, since he's wearing a Cowboy shirt over there, start of the football season, and I know he's very excited about it. So
yeah, that's what I'm wearing, Cages.
Anyways, enjoy the weekend. Thanks for joining, and we'll be back next week again with more topics. But thanks, Brent and Raju, and see y'all next week.